All right, take a million. Welcome to the CotAcasT. My name is Bermudez. I'm the host of the CraftoftheAir podcast. The podcast not only for aviation enthusiasts, but also for those with general interest in the world of aviation. Join us on our journey as we explore the horizon of aviation together. First things first, today's episode is brought to you by CraftoftheAir. Yes, brought to you by CraftoftheAir. Of course, we don't have any sponsors just yet. But yeah, today's episode is brought to you by CraftoftheAir. Don't just memorize outdated content and stop rereading prepware without understanding. Every student that's listening right now in an A&P Part 147 maintenance school knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you're looking to obtain your A&P license and need just a little extra help, CraftoftheAir offers personalized learning sessions remotely from the convenience of your house. And maybe you've already gotten your A&P license, or maybe you're a pilot, or you do something else, your cabin crew. If you're in the field of aviation and need help accomplishing a next big project, something big coming up, big presentation, need a little extra help finding parts, maybe you're moving across the country and need a little bit of extra help on your job search, where you're going. Now stop searching endlessly for unreliable data online. CraftoftheAir is the second you when you need it. Anything aviation, CraftoftheAir works for you. So visit www.craftoftheair.com today and speak with a federally licensed professional. CraftoftheAir, our craft is of the air. So yes, of course, excuse me, the very first episode it's sponsored by CraftoftheAir. So now the CotAcasT, and I know my accent I'm from Queens, New York. It's a little bit heavy at times. I try to pronounce things out. I'm a professor of aviation maintenance, and I talk a lot. But yeah, the accent, I just can't escape. I just can't. It doesn't, no matter how hard I try. But yeah, the CotAcasT. Coda as in Charlie, Oscar, Tango, Alpha. Coda is Craft of the Air, and it's a podcast. And you know, CraftoftheAir is a company that I developed for personalized aviation maintenance training solution. You know, I think over the course of my time teaching in the aviation maintenance community, I wanted to develop something a little bit more personalized for students. I think there's something that can be done to kind of fill that gap of where we see, a lapse in mechanics coming into the field. But I'll get into all of that at a later time. But yeah, CraftoftheAir was developed for personalized learning solutions to help students out, where they need help with basic electricity or they're preparing for the federal exams, and I made it remote. Something that is convenient for students. I know a lot of students sometimes may not necessarily be comfortable asking questions in class, or may not necessarily be getting, they're maybe asking the questions that they have in these Part 147 technical schools or colleges, but maybe they're not necessarily getting the answers that they can understand. I think it's no secret that we have a big shortage, and we're not necessarily getting a lot of passes on the airframe and power plant ratings. I have a lot of attempts. The pass rate is definitely improving, I'll say that. But there's definitely an issue there, where we have so many students in these Part 147 schools, and they get to the end and they can't relate all of that content that they've learned over the course of 18 months or 2 years or 4 years, and they can't pass the federal exams. So the question I have is, what's curriculum in place? Recently the ACS curriculum did change in Part 147 schools. Excuse me. But I'm not sure how beneficial that be to prospective A&Ps, to the students in the schools. I'm not sure. I can tell you that after one semester under the new ACS, we kind of just changed the order. We kind of just changed the topics, and we add a couple of topics here that need to be covered and kind of take away from this topic that's not necessarily technology and use. But I'm not sure if it would improve, how many aviation maintenance professionals are coming into the field. That brings us to the first topic. And the first topic that we discuss on the very first podcast is the interesting topic of the aviation maintenance shortage. And the question that I have, after reading a very interesting article, are the people or the individuals that work on these airplanes, would you consider them aviation maintenance engineers or aviation mechanics, aircraft mechanics? And of course I'm going to be just a little bit biased, being an A&P myself. I think that I've been around a lot of different settings. I've been around a lot of different, I've been an A&P. I've worked line maintenance, hangar maintenance, MROs. I've been a professor of aviation maintenance. I've worked as an airframe consultant. Worked as a technical consultant. I'm not sure that you can sit there and say that an individual who is single-handedly responsible for working on something that's worth sometimes $150, $170 million. Now, I just gotta slow it down. The first topic that we discussed on the very first podcast is the interesting topic of the aviation maintenance shortage. And the question that I have, after reading a very interesting article, are the people or the individuals that work on these airplanes, would you consider them aviation maintenance engineers or aviation mechanics, aircraft mechanics? And of course I'm going to be just a little bit biased, being an A&P myself. I think that I've been around a lot of different settings. I've been around a lot of different, I've been an A&P. I've worked line maintenance, hangar maintenance, MROs. I've been a professor of aviation maintenance. I've worked as an airframe consultant. Worked as a technical consultant. I'm not sure that you can sit there and say that an individual who is single-handedly responsible for working on something that's worth sometimes $150, $170 million. Now, I just gotta slow it down before we get completely into that topic. But yes, the very first topic that I wanted to discuss was, this shortage. I found something really interesting. Let me bring it up here. I found something really interesting, and it was a pilot and here it is, a pilot and technician outlook, and this was published by Boeing. Now it's a 20-year outlook, 2022 to 2041, almost 20 years. And this pilot and technician outlook, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's this kind of report and this projection that Boeing is, I'm biased with Boeing. I love Boeing. I've worked on Boeing, Airbus, Embraer. I love Boeing. But Boeing being one of the largest aircraft manufacturers in the world, the best. I can't say it. The best. All right, but Boeing being one of the largest aircraft manufacturers in the world, so they released this pilot and technician outlook, and it's kind of this projection that it's kind of giving airlines, operators, people in the aviation industry kind of a general idea on what to expect in terms of, how many mechanics we may need, how many pilots we may need, at the current rate, how many pilots are getting, going through flight school and getting their ratings and coming in and working in the field, mechanics, cabin crew, aviation, the shortages, forget about pilots, mechanics, for 1 second. Pilots there's a huge shortage. And this is another highly trained skill. And it's becoming quite an issue, the shortage. Of course, being a mechanic, there's always this little rivalry between the pilots and the mechanics, but these guys are professionals. Very difficult jobs, and they can't be filled as well, right? So going back to this Boeing outlook for pilots and technicians, I found this interesting, and I quote, it says, long-term demand for newly qualified aviation personnel remains strong as 602,000 new pilots, as 610,000 new maintenance technicians. We'll speak about technicians. I don't like that term. 610,000 new maintenance technicians and 899,000 new cabin crew members will be needed to fly and maintain the global commercial fleet over the next 20 years. That's huge. Well, 602,000 pilots, 610,000 maintenance technicians. Now, to be fair, this is globally. These numbers being projected by Boeing is globally. So if you look at North America, you're looking at 435,000 pilots, mechanics, cabin crew over the next 20 years. Now, the issue that we have is that we're not getting a lot of professionals, a lot of maintenance professionals coming into the field. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. I mean, first and foremost, let's just get really real. All right. How many kids grow up saying, when you go ask that kid and you say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that kid tells you, oh, I want to fix airplanes when I grow older. How many kids say that? For me, I always had a passion for aviation, but that was the farthest thing from my mind. See, I loved airplanes from as far back as I can remember, but I as I grew older, I knew I wanted to do something in aviation, but I wasn't just quite sure. I knew I didn't want to be a pilot. I'm not going to speak about why. But I was also always very good with my hands, and I was always very good at fixing things and troubleshooting things and understanding how things work. And so I combined both of those things together, and it worked out amazing for me. And having a mother who was a really good teacher, elementary school teacher, and really passionate about her job. I really admired her, and I loved the way she taught. I'm talking New York now. You hear it coming out, like we're on Queens Boulevard, talking to you like I'm with my boy. Okay, let's get professional. But and now I get to teach at the college level, and I love that. I love aviation. I love getting the opportunity, the privilege, really, to teach about each system. At this point, I've taught every single system within airframe, general, and power plant. But anyway, getting off the topic a little bit here. The numbers from that pilot and technician report by Boeing, that's big. That's a lot, and I don't know how we're going to fill that gap, because going back to one of my points, I don't know how many kids grow up wanting to be an aviation maintenance professional. I think a lot of people are attracted to the field, to be quite honest, because either A, we have veterans, which are probably the best. Veterans coming out of the service, the GI Bill, and they already are accustomed, coming from a similar field in the service, and that's a good profession for them. I wish we would get more. In my opinion, I don't think that if you're a veteran and you have sufficient training, I don't think you should have to go through all the 2,100 hours or so in the Part 147 program. I like, though, that the GI Bill covers it. I like that students get the opportunity to come to school. I got the opportunity when I was a student. All my buddies, a lot of them, wanted the GI Bill, veterans. A lot of my students now. But yeah, a lot of people are coming into the field, and the people coming into the field may not necessarily be passionate about fixing planes. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from students in our degree program that they're just in it for the flight benefits. Shame. Same person that doesn't know how to use a torque wrench. Pretty sad. But this is where it's going, I think when I was a student, I think it was practically every day that we'd hear that there was, a shortage coming up. And it proved, it was very evident when I graduated that there was a shortage, and that gap just kept growing. And then the pandemic just pushed that gap into just a valley, really. On one side of the valley is the airlines and everybody that needs an A&P, and on the other side is the aviation schools and technical schools and colleges that are producing them. And you got a trickling stream of A&Ps. Yeah, the pass rate has improved somewhat, but we still, from the amount of attempts in our country to the amount of A&Ps coming out. Now, I'd have to check this, but there was an FAA report that I had looked at, and this document, from what I can gather, this document has said we had an increase from 2021 to 2022 of about 13,000 mechanics, which is really good. But we'll have to see, and that's kind of red flag me. 13,000 out of nowhere. What's the DMEs? Where's the DMEs? Who's getting passed? It's like the schools, the reputable schools, and then you find out where somebody else got their A&P license, and you're like, did he really take the test? Okay, it's too controversial, too quick. That's another podcast, right? It's yeah. And when you think about it, it's a shame because when you have so many students that are coming into the programs and not necessarily getting towards the end and getting their A&P licenses and maybe just getting a degree, of course, if their intent was to get the A&P license, if their intent was to not, then, but that's a shame. I think I had briefly, over the again. If you look at an A&P, the cost of an A&P mechanic school in the United States, the certifications alone are roughly $30,000. If you're attempting your A&P license, and that's like a technical school, right? A Part 147 approved technical school, they're everywhere. They're great. In fact, I had read something that AIM is the Aviation Maintenance, or the Aviation Institute of Maintenance, and it's one of the biggest technical schools. I think they have like 13 or 14 different schools around the country. They're not colleges, but they're technical schools. Pretty good. The campuses look really, really pretty good. I think, and this is actually good news, I think AIM had teamed up with American Airlines back in December. And I believe that this partnership with American Airlines and AIM I think it would at least guarantee graduates from that program after they completed the 2,100 hours of airframe and power plant. I think that they were at least guaranteed an interview with American. And with the shortage, I'm sure, that's almost a guaranteed job ticket at that point. Or not guaranteed. Obviously, you have to be someone normal in your interview. But I thought that was good. That's pretty good. I'd hope that more partnerships like that are coming out. But yeah, that's a huge cost. $30,000 is big to get towards the end, and then what are you left with? A certificate, a piece of paper that says you went to technical school for 2 years. That's not a good deal, man. If you're looking at getting an associate's, all right, if you go to a college that has an associate's degree program associated with the mechanic, airframe power plant with it, you're looking at about $50,000. If you go for a BS, you're looking at about $60,000. So it's a big investment to get to the end and to not know how to answer a DME. For those of you who don't know how the A&P exam works. Now, an A&P is somebody who is one of, in most cases, don't get at me with the Part 14 CFRs right now. And the private pilots can do preventative maintenance. Yeah, I know. But under most cases, in the United States, you must have an A&P license, A&P 2 ratings, technically 3, because you got to put general in there. You need these 2 licenses. So you need to be federally licensed. They're issued by the Department of Transportation, FAA, and to work on an airplane. I always get that question. People say, well, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I teach and I fix airplanes. I said, what do you mean you fix airplanes? What do you mean you're an aircraft mechanic? What does that mean? And I say, well, we just about fix everything from the nose to the tail. It can be from a weather radar to your seatbelt inside the flight deck, a landing light to a $50 million jet engine. We can fix it all. We know the science behind it. We know how it works. We know everything inside. We know how to troubleshoot it. We know how to operate it. Tell me that's not an engineer. I'll get to that in a second. So I get really real. But getting back to my point, for the AP process, you know, you have airframe and power plant, and when you go through this, you know, you have a written, oral, and practical portion for each rating. So for your general license, you have written, oral, practical, airframe, written, oral, practical, power plant, written, oral, practical. And they'll break it up into a whole bunch of sections, just a whole bunch of different sections of the airplane, different systems, for those of you who are not familiar. And the student will have to take a written portion. He has to obtain at least 70%. Then they'll take an oral, in which a federally licensed DME, a designated mechanic examiner, will actually ask the students technical questions in each subject area. So that's the practical, and that could be intense. And then once you get past all of that, and you got to repeat it for each. For some people, this whole process, this test could take over a week. And then once you get through that, you have to do a practical. Same thing, go through every single section and system of the aircraft, and then in front of this FAA DME, you have to show him or demonstrate to him that you can do the work on the aircraft itself. Let's be really real. You're being trusted with people's lives in your hands. A single A&P is the person that constitutes that aircraft as being airworthy. For those of you listening, a lot of people don't know that. Before that aircraft leaves in the morning, before you getting on the plane to go to the Cayman Islands, that aircraft has to be signed off by an A&P, a federally licensed A&P. Only person that can do it. Not even a pilot. And this is just a career field that is a huge shortage. Now, you know, I'd wrap it up by saying, you know, I read a very interesting article by John Dillenberg from the United States Trust Institute of Maintenance. Very, very, very good article. And the title of the article, Mr. Dillenberg says, U.S. Aviation Training Group Trust Flight asks, aircraft maintenance technician versus aircraft maintenance engineer. And if you have the opportunity, take a look at this article by John Dillenberg. I have to say that I strongly agree with his opinion on the fact that aircraft maintenance engineers, this is what we should be called. Let's get really real here. Come on. This is somebody that every single night they're single-handedly, in most cases, let's get really real, line maintenance, JFK, LaGuardia, EWR, we know there's a shortage. You're working the RON by yourself. Come on. All the A&Ps know what I'm talking about right now. The aircraft that's remaining overnight, you're working it yourself. You're going back and forth to the parts room, getting this, going for the reference, getting that. You're gonna go get a light bulb, clear a MEL. Come on. I know the deal. And every single morning, because let's be honest, a lot of guys work nights. Every single morning, you are single-handedly responsible for signing your signature and your A&P number. You're responsible for 241 lives and a $175 million airplane. Come on. And how many flights, how many legs that aircraft is taking that day off your signature? Maybe they'll do a check when it gets to the other side. You're responsible for maybe what? 750 people flying on a $150 million airplane, traveling 610 knots at 35,000 feet. And somebody's going to call you an aircraft mechanic. A lot of people don't know that. A&P is a person that has to fix everything on that aircraft, and you have to taxi that plane out. We have to get in touch with air traffic control, start the engines, push back, get the plane pushed back, and go do an engine run-up on a run-up pad somewhere in the airport. Yes, 3:30 in the morning, EWR. This is it, and I think it's very arrogant and egregious. Egregious for you to sit there and say that these professionals are aircraft maintenance technicians. Because I'm going to get really real. A technician is somebody that comes to your house to install your Wi-Fi or cable box. You could make the argument that we have aircraft engineers, aviation engineers that design aircraft systems. I'm not knocking that. We're not on that level, or at least I'm not. And I'm not going to pretend to be on a level that somebody, an engineer that designs jet engines and aerospace systems. But those are aerospace engineers. Aerospace, everything that flies. It can be a jet engine, it can be a commercial plane, it can be a helicopter. In my opinion, that's an aerospace engineer. But again, referring back to this article by Mr. John Dillenberg, aircraft maintenance engineer. Maintenance engineer. Kalistad. No. I will wrap it up for this week's episode of the CotAcasT. If you have not done so already, take this opportunity to check out the Craft of the Air website and subscribe to the Craft of the Air Instagram page to always be in the Craft of the Air loop. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Spotify podcasts and subscribe, and stay tuned for next week. Next week, I really want to speak about private aviation, and there's some interesting. You gotta stay tuned. It's gonna get really real. So, anyway, thanks for joining again. Today's episode of the CotAcasT was brought to you by Craft of the Air. Don't just memorize outdated content. Stop rereading Prepper without understanding what you're reading. You're not going to pass that way. If you're personalized, if you're looking to obtain your A&P license and need a little extra help, Craft of the Air offers personalized learning solutions remotely from the convenience of your house. You don't have to leave. Are you in the field of aviation and need help accomplishing your next big job? Are you tired of searching endlessly online for unreliable data? When you're just looking for things online, you can't find anything, or you find something, you're like, wait, is this a reliable source? What website is this from? Stop that. Craft of the Air is a second you when you need it, and a second eye and ear when you don't have the time. Let's be honest. Anything in aviation, Craft of the Air works for you. Visit www.CraftoftheAir.com. Again, www.CraftoftheAir.com today, and speak with a federally licensed professional. Craft of the Air, our craft is of the air. All right, take care, guys.